So without further ado, I'd like to introduce McGraw-Hill Education Consultant, Shelly McClanahan. Shelly is an experienced teacher, curriculum writer, and math and science coach. She has a BS in math education from the University of South Florida and a master's degree in educational leadership from National Louis University. All right, Shelly, let's get started.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Really excited to conduct this webinar for you. I just wanted to kind of go over our objectives for today. They're first to help define and identify rigor. We know there are many myths and misconceptions around the topic, and today we're going to work to clarify the meaning. Second, we will show you how to use instructional materials to support rigor. Specifically, we'll be looking at how Glencoe Math and how it aids in rigorous instruction. And then finally, we'll take a look at how you can address the depths required in the Common Core state standards. Before we dive into this information, I'd like to learn a little about you and your background. Are you a teacher, a principal, a district curriculum administrator, or a district trainer? So we're going to take a second and get some of that information. And Trish, I'll wait for you to give me that information. I can't see the poll.
It looks like we've got 84% of teachers on, 3% principal, 5% district trainer, and 8% identifying as other. So we've got a pretty good, solid amount of teachers on, and then a few of the other folks here.
Well, great. Thanks. I appreciate that, and I'm glad to know that we've got a lot of teachers joining us. And so we're going to give you just one more question, too. What we'd like to know is, how long have you been teaching?
Okay, it looks like most of the people on here have taught for 10 or more years. We have 72% of people that have taught for 10 or more years, 15% at 5 to 10 years, and then a smaller percentage, 5% for 0 to 3 years, and 8% for 3 to 5 years.
Okay. Well, thank you for all you veterans here. Many of you all have seen many changes in education. And with Common Core being the most recent one. And so it's great to know that you're here to learn a little bit more about how you can increase the rigor in your classrooms. Well, let's go ahead and start with some myths and some misconceptions about what rigor actually is. The first misconception is that rigor means more work. Well, in this case, the quantity of work really doesn't correlate to the level of rigor. We really should be concentrating on the depth and the quality of work instead. Another misconception is that rigor means harder. While rigorous work can certainly be more challenging for students because they're often asked to draw from a variety of experiences, students will also need to stretch their skills, which can be uncomfortable for some students. Some students might actually find that the more rigorous process is easier for them than solving basic problems that don't relate to their experiences. Rigorous instruction should be relevant to the real world, and many students will enjoy this new approach. The third misconception is that rigor is only for higher achieving students. Well, rigorous instruction does deal with uncertainty. You may find that some of your lowest performing students might actually be more skilled in dealing with the uncertainty and complexity that comes along with solving those real-world problems. Students must master the basics before engaging in rigorous learning. This is probably the one that comes up most often. But actually, rigorous learning exists within, but definitely at the outer edge of each student's capabilities. Students should become familiar with the rigor while they are learning those fundamentals. And lastly, rigorous standards lead to rigorous learning. Well, of course, the standards are the guidelines that inform your instruction and the ones that informed our development of McGraw-Hill's educational materials. But it's the rich instruction and the student's ownership of the work that will lead to that rigorous learning. So now that we know what rigor is not, let's define what rigor is and what it looks like. Research has shown that there are characteristics common to rigorous classrooms. First of all, students are actively engaged in analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating ideas. Students are active participants rather than passive learners. Students also build on prior knowledge and make informed choices to solve problems. In taking an active role in their learning, students will build on what they have already learned in math classes and through their own life experiences. And third, rigorous learning exists within, but at the outer edge of each student's capabilities. This means that every student should be working slightly outside of his or her comfort zone. This is when we learn. It's when we stretch our skills. Now, rigorous problems are complex. Many times there can be more than one correct answer, but all of the answers must be justified. In a rigorous classroom, students understand that there can be a range of solutions and they can defend their answers. Finally, rigorous learning is relevant to the real world. It involves uncertainty and requires students to make nuanced judgments. When developing rigorous instructional materials at McGraw-Hill Education, we follow this systemic pattern of 5 phases. The first stage is to engage. We like to engage our students with real-world mathematical challenges right from the very beginning of the lesson. The second step is to explore, where students obtain and organize their information. The explain step allows students to use their thinking skills to process the information and explain their thinking. The fourth step is elaborate, where students develop their thinking skills by analyzing what they have learned and then elaborate and justify their reasoning based on facts. In the evaluate phase, students reflect on how to use what they have learned in other situations. McGraw-Hill Education's middle school program, Glencoe Math, incorporates rigor in many ways, including Common Core aligned units, inquiry labs, hot problems or higher order thinking problems, some problem-solving investigations, performance tasks, unit projects, and a lot of rigorous activities using Geometer Sketchpad. Let's take a closer look at these. Each of the 5 units in each one of our books corresponds to one of the Common Core domains, such as this example from our Grade 7 Course 2 book. Now let's look at some of the activities that are in our books that provide rigorous learning opportunities. We'll start first with the inquiry labs. The inquiry labs are at the heart of rigor in Glencoe Math. They are designed to actively engage students in creating their own understanding of main ideas. The labs begin with a guided investigation or hands-on activity to engage students and allow them to explore the content. These labs introduce and revisit a small set of powerful models that can be used in many contexts, including bar diagrams, number lines, algebra tiles, 2-color counters, and dynamic geometry software. Then students collaborate with their peers to explore and explain the content further before they analyze what they've learned and look for patterns and draw conclusions. This really gives students the opportunity to actually create their own mathematical meanings. They then reflect individually to ensure that each student has their own understanding of the mathematical content. Each Glencoe Math unit not only aligns to the major content domains in the Common Core, but also contains at least 7 inquiry labs to provide the rigorous learning opportunities that support students in constructing meaning and reflecting on their own learning. Each lesson contains hot problems that also foster a rigorous approach by focusing on higher order thinking. They push the students to think and to construct arguments or to explain their reasoning. In addition, these problems are specifically aligned to the standards for mathematical practice in the Common Core. Hot problems help students make connections to other mathematics and include expectations for them to develop a deeper understanding. Another rigorous resource in our Glencoe Math program is the problem-solving investigations. These are designed to help develop thinking skills, and they explicitly address 10 specific problem-solving strategies. Those strategies are the 4-step plan, determine reasonable answers, look for a pattern, draw a diagram, make a table, work backward, make a model, solve a simpler problem, act it out, and use a graph. These same 10 strategies are re-emphasized in each year of the program using the major content in that course to ensure that students are proficient in using each one of the strategies. Now, once the problem-solving strategy is introduced to the students, they collaborate with their peers to solve what we call cases that involve rigorous mathematical problems. In some of the cases that they solve, they are prompted to use the specific strategy they just learned about. And in the cases at the end of the lesson, they're encouraged to use any strategy at all. Performance tasks are available for each chapter, and these do include a scoring rubric for teachers that gives students an opportunity to practice with the rigorous type of questions that the Common Core demands. Finally, each unit ends with a large open-ended project. These projects allow students to adapt what they've learned about the main ideas and apply them to novel situations. To add rigor, the projects are designed so that students must use their own creativity and problem-solving skills to create projects that do not have predetermined answers. And McGraw-Hill just recently acquired Geometer Sketchpad, and we have incorporated rigorous activities into the Glencoe Math program that let students explore the dynamic world of mathematics and work collaboratively with their peers to develop rich mathematical understanding. As you can see, there are a lot of rigorous opportunities for students within the Glencoe Math program. Now, how can you make sure to incorporate the rigor into your classroom? Well, the Common Core has given much more clarity and definition to the higher order thinking that is integral to a rigorous approach by explicitly stating the 8 standards for mathematical practice, and these are the same for all levels of mathematics. I like to call these the habits of mind of mathematically proficient students. Incorporating these into your instructional processes will set your students up for success with rigorous mathematics. Let's take a look at those 8. The first one is make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Well, the answer shouldn't always be obvious, and students should have to struggle occasionally. They should always be asking themselves, does this make sense? The second one is reason abstractly and quantitatively. In this practice, students make sense of quantities and their relationships in problem situations. The third one, construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. This is a fun one for students as they get to justify their conclusions and look to find the errors in the thinking of others. In the fourth practice, we have model with mathematics. At any time you can incorporate manipulatives or ask students to solve real-world problems, you're asking them to model with mathematics. The fifth one is to use appropriate tools strategically. Now, these tools might be paper and pencil, a calculator, manipulative, a spreadsheet, a protractor, or any other mathematical tool. The key here is that students know when to use what tool and that they use them strategically to explore and deepen their understanding of concepts. The next one is to attend to precision. In this practice, students are not only precise in their calculations, but they also remember to include units of measure, label the axes in their graphs, and consistently and appropriately use signs such as the equal sign. The seventh one, although it says 9 up there, not quite sure about that, sorry. The seventh one is to look for and make use of structure. For this one, think about patterns and the ability to recognize things like the number 20 can be represented as maybe 1 times 20, 2 times 10, or 4 times 5. Students have the ability to recognize and provide both examples and non-examples of mathematical concepts when they're looking for and making use of structure. And lastly, students look for and express regularity in repeated reasoning. This one also involves patterns, but even more so because students are looking for patterns in calculations that allow them to find general methods and shortcuts in calculations that lead to sound mathematical conclusions. Now, most of the time, these practices are taught in conjunction with one another. For more information, please be sure to see the concise details as provided by Common Core. There are so many Common Core teaching resources to incorporate rigor in the Glencoe Middle School Math program. In the front matter of our teacher editions, there are correlations to both the mathematical practices and the content standards, as well as at the beginning of each unit. At the end of this webinar today, you will receive a link that will give you access to the program so that you can take it for a test drive yourself and see how rigor is done. As you know, curriculum design is only part of what defines rigor. What actually happens in your classrooms is critically important. So when working with your students or planning activities, you might want to ask yourself, what is the level of student engagement? Are you noticing that all of your students are thinking about the concepts and sharing justifications? Or are only a few students excited and elaborating on what they learned? What type of questions are you asking? Are you asking true, false, recollection of facts, or are you using open-ended questions that require students to recall something they already know and use it to solve a new problem? Are you giving students enough time to provide thorough answers? Remember, some students will need more time to develop their thoughts, and whatever they have to share may deepen the understanding among their classmates. Resist the urge to avoid uncomfortable silences, giving time for all students to be engaged in the learning. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to take some time for you to share what techniques you use in your classroom. Please use the chat feature to write some examples you've used in your classroom, and we'll share these with the group.
Okay, so we'll just take a couple minutes here. If you could use either the chat feature on the right side of your screen or the questions feature and type in some of the techniques that you use, and then we'll be sure to share those to the whole entire group. Just take about a minute and a half here. Okay, we have a few coming in here. We have one participant that wrote that they use math chalk. Another one that came from both Justin and Tammy saying that they use patterns to teach negative exponents. And Stephanie shared that they do a lot of think alouds in small groups and as a class, giving everyone an opportunity to justify their thinking. We have a couple more coming in here. Here we have one teacher that will post the questions prior to class, giving students that take a little bit more time to think about their answers a little bit more, would like to have thoughtful answers. She'll post those before the class so that people can come prepared for them and then answer in more depth while they're there. And then she builds upon those questions while in class, and instead of just going quickly to the first person that answers, she will wait a few seconds in between and allow the majority of the class to participate or at least show that they are interested to adding to the group. I think that might be the last one here. Oh, no, we have another one. This one's from Janetta. She has students justify why they would choose their answers. Oh, sorry, I don't think I have the beginning of hers. Let's see here. Oh, this teacher, I don't have a name here, but it says the students will show their work on the Elmo, and the class critiques the other's group work, and they'll ask, how did you get that, or how do you know that, after each response. It's a good one.
I agree, Trish. I think those are all great ideas. I really like the question of being able to post that question before class. I think that really does give all the students an opportunity to really think about that and make sure that they're all accountable for that. The math chats and the math talks and things like that are some of the things that are most important for teachers to give students an opportunity to communicate mathematically. It's important that they can communicate written, with paper pencil, but also that they can talk about that mathematically and be able to critique the reasoning of others, and then to just kind of listen to the critiques that others have so they can defend their answers. And that's really when they're going to learn the math the most. I really like the idea that was shared about working on the Elmo, because anytime we can display student work in a very non-threatening environment, we're giving them the opportunity, again, to communicate mathematically, but also to just really get a deeper understanding of the mathematics, especially as the topics get more complex and students see that there's not always just one way to answer a question. And along that same lines, I think that the best question that a teacher can ask every time in response to students when they give an answer in class is to just say why. Just ask, why did you get that? So that they're not thinking, oh, I got the wrong answer, but they're thinking, she's going to ask me to explain this. So why is one of the most important questions that we can ask any of our students. So did any more come in?
Yeah, and actually a couple of just along the lines of what you were just saying. Another one from Johnetta saying that they create questions that require multiple correct answers, such as which of these numbers are rational, and they have them select several numbers. And then again, along those lines, this teacher will have their classmates ask, do you agree or disagree with what John said, or do you have another way to solve that problem? Is there a second or a third way to solve that problem, which I think really hits on how there isn't one way to answer a question, and there also isn't one answer to a lot of questions. And as you discussed with rigorous instruction, that's a big area of that, is that when you're applying when students are applying these techniques to the real world, in the real world, it's not usually black and white. There's usually various ways to do one thing and different answers that you'll come up with. We have another one from Marcia that says that she's been using a think, pair, share technique where the students work on a problem by themselves. Then they break into pairs to discuss, and then they present a final product in which they are required to justify their reasoning behind the answer. We also had another person, Therese, say that she also does think, pair, share in her classroom, and this offers students time to compare their answers with one another, and it also gives them time to justify their answers. And I think
good, and those are all kind of like the standards, the mathematical practices, especially where they're looking for and making use of structures. If students can demonstrate that they can show both an example and a non-example, it's definitely getting at the standard 7 where they can see all of that. And then the fact that students have to come up with multiple answers or can see that there are multiple answers, that's one of the big changes with the Common Core assessments now, is that for many of the questions, if you've seen any of the sample released items, that is one of the things that is going to be, I think, most difficult for students to understand, is that some of those questions will have more than one right answer, or perhaps every one of the answers that are given are good answers for them to see. So those are all some great examples that are there. I really like the think, pair, share. It gets the child who might not be afraid to say something to actually speak out. But the more comfortable that we can get students in discussing mathematics, the better off that they will be, which the fact that we have a lot of teachers who have experienced teachers on the line, that's quite a shift from classrooms where maybe we learned when we were in a classroom where it was very quiet in the classroom and the teacher was dispensing the knowledge and telling us what we needed to know, and we were doing things like memorizing that negative times negative was positive because that's the rule. But nowadays, kids are actually getting in and justifying those meanings and coming up with that on their own. So any of these activities that you all are using or would consider using in your classroom are definitely ways to increase the rigor in your classroom. So good on you. Anything else, Trish?
Great. I think we have all of them. Yeah.
Okay, well, great. Thank you all for sharing. So we are coming to the end of our time here, and I'd just like to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you have about anything that we've talked about today. So Trish has been collecting any questions you've sent through the webinar, so we'll just take a second, and you can, again, use that chat feature to ask any additional questions you have, and I'll wait to see if Trish has anything for me.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have a couple here, and then like Shelly has said, is if you have some as we're answering these questions, just go ahead and put that in the question section, and I'll get those together. Okay, first question is from Anne, and she was just curious to hear more about what Sketchpad is and how teachers can use that in the classroom. Is this something that comes along with the program for free?
Okay, Anne, that's a great question. Sketchpad, some people have used Sketchpad in the past, and many schools across the country already have a license to Sketchpad. What we have done now that we have taken that, the company we bought that from was called Key Curriculum Press. We acquired the digital resources, so that was Sketchpad, Tinkerplots, and Fathom. You can go to keycurriculum.com and you can download a trial version of Sketchpad to use with your students in your classroom, and in fact the students can download it as well. It gives you full access to the newest version of Sketchpad, with the exception of you are not able to print or save any of the sketches that you've created, but it's great to use as a demonstration tool. And we have created many resource activities there for you to use. Now in the new book, they're correlated right at point of use, and you'll know exactly which ones to use. But for now, if you go to keycurriculum.com and you click on the tab that says Resources, you'll see a part there that says Free Activities. And underneath Free Activities, you'll see all sorts of activities there. You just download those. Each one of them comes with a pre-made activity that you can run. Then there's also a teacher worksheet as well as a student worksheet that's there. So for now, that's the easiest way to get them, and in the future, the best way to get them is with the Glencoe Math program.
Great. Okay, we have a question here from Sue. She is wondering if rigor is a main topic of the Common Core state standards, and if students will be tested on this.
Well, rigor is not a topic. It is kind of embedded throughout everything within Common Core. Common Core is just the content standards define the content that we teach at each grade level, but Common Core does not tell us how to teach that. What it does tell us is that we need to incorporate more rigorous activities and more opportunities for students to use those standards for mathematical practice. So rigor, the term rigor in itself is not really a topic. It's kind of a descriptor of what we need, the types of tasks that we need to be providing for our students within the context of the learning.
Okay, great. And another question from Nick, who's asking if Glencoe Math has some virtual manipulatives that can be used to give students like the hands-on instruction that you were discussing.
Absolutely. At the end of this webinar, you will get a link to try out the program. You'll have full access to it, and once you get into there, I encourage you to look for the e-toolkit, is what we call it. You can click on any of the resource tabs, or click on the resource tab that's for any lesson, and you'll see the e-toolkit. We have some older virtual manipulatives, and then we have a brand new e-toolkit that provides some wonderful dynamic tools that you can use there, such as three-dimensional figures that you can rotate around, a great one on transformations, graphing on the coordinate plane, and a great compass and protractor that you can use right there in class. And it will work with any smartboard, Promethean board, any sort of interactive whiteboard that you have in your classroom, or I often just use it right on, just projecting onto a wall with my wireless mouse.
Great. And then a question from Deborah is your program K-12? And related to that, Nicholas is wondering if the high school program has a similar format.
Okay, thanks, Deborah and Nicholas. The program, we do have K-12 mathematics. In fact, we have pre-K-12 mathematics where we incorporate these rigorous standards and activities throughout. And you can contact any of the sales reps, and they can get you copies of any of that. All of them do also incorporate all of the virtual manipulatives, as well as the e-toolkit is in each one of those. And the Geometer Sketchpad activities have been correlated all the way through up. So I'm not sure what courses Nicholas teaches, but if you're looking for a high school course that really supports the use of Geometer Sketchpad and that dynamic geometry software in a geometry and Algebra 2 course, this is definitely the program for you.
Great. We have a couple more questions coming in here. How can I apply Bloom's taxonomy to increase rigor in my class?
Okay. Well, with Bloom's taxonomy, those are just some of those higher order thinking questions. I personally believe that as they were writing the standards for mathematical practice, that they kind of took into consideration a lot of those higher order thinking questions that are in Bloom. So we're not talking about the recall questions at the lower level of Bloom's, but definitely any of those higher level thinking questions that you can incorporate into your daily lessons will definitely increase the rigor in your classroom.
Great. We have a question from Marcia. She's wondering, do you have any suggestions to get students to start thinking and stop relying on teachers' approval of right-wrong answers? Good question.
That's definitely a tough one. But I would say the more that you can ask the question why. Because students have been led to believe that there is a right or a wrong answer, and they're not used to justifying their responses. So the more that you can incorporate, and you just need to be sure that they understand that that is going to be your answer every single time, whether the answer is right or whether the answer is wrong, your response should always be why. Just to get them thinking about that. And it's an uncomfortable situation right at first, but then they kind of catch on and they realize that they get to do a lot of the talking and a lot of the teaching of others. That's another great way to really start to incorporate that.
Okay, and another one here we have from Susan, which is, how can you provide rigor for all levels of learners in your class?
Well, keep in mind that rigor means that you are stretching every child to the edge of their ability. So in a lot of ways, a lot of the ways that you can incorporate the rigor into there is to relate it to their everyday experiences, which for a lot of students, especially our lowest level learners that we have, one of the reasons they're not very successful in mathematics is because it has kind of focused on the abstract and not been brought down to their level or to something that makes sense to them. And what you'll find in the Glencoe Math series is that every single one of our lessons opens up with a real-world link that's there. So feel free to try any of the lessons that are inside our books, or even that first page, and just see, because part of the time the key is to engage the students right from the very beginning so that they start to understand that it does connect to their world. And then you'll find that your, at least what I found is that my highest achieving learners, they kind of struggled with the fact that there was that real life context in there because they could just figure that question out. So it really becomes quite a balancing act, but it becomes a lot more fun for the students and for the teachers.
Great. Still a few more questions here. We have one from Deborah. She's wondering if we offer any resources for ELL students.
For the ELL students, when you get into the program, if you click on the lesson planning tab, we have built-in lesson plans. And if you look at the lesson plans that are there, you will see that there are a lot of ELL strategies. We have a couple of ELL handbooks that come with the program that provide some alternate teaching strategies for you as well. But you'll see some of the ELL strategies are in the Walk Around Teacher Edition, and then there are even more of them online with the lesson planner.
Great. Okay, we have a couple here about if we're going to send the links out after this webinar, and we will. You'll receive an email that will have a link to this webinar, the recorded version of this webinar. It will also have a link to a website you can go to get virtual access to a sampler if you don't already have the program. At that, you can also look at some of our print features on the website there as well. I think, let me just go through this one more time to make sure we've answered everything. We have someone asking if she can share the links that we provide so our teachers can review the materials, and yes, that's fine. You're welcome to share it to anyone. Actually, the website that we'll send you a link for allows you to set up some login information, so each of your teachers could set up their own login to sample the program virtually.
And just so you know, too, when you're on the main login screen, when you log into ConnectEd, across the bottom you'll see a Help button, and you can click on the Help button there, or it is within the program in the upper right-hand corner. And clicking on that will give you access to a lot of videos that will show you how to navigate the site, because one of the things that's really nice is not only do we provide you with a lot of resources that you can use, but each one of them is just one click away for you to be able to find those. So be sure to click on any of those help videos that you have there. And your salespeople can set up a webinar or an in-person trial that, kind of walk you through that. They'll be happy to do that.
Okay, it looks like we just have this one final question, at least right now, from Stephanie. She says she adopted this series for her junior high. She said it's wonderful and the problem-solving activities are great. She's finding that some of her students tune out when they're looking at the examples, the areas where it's already, like, the information's already filled out for the students to show them how to go through the work. And she's using Think Aloud and asking why questions, but she's having trouble getting some student engagement there. Do you have any tips for what she can do to help students move through the examples before they actually get to doing their own work independently, completely independently?
What I would do with the examples is, because they do also have the watch feature that takes the examples kind of in a step-by-step format. I would have it so that the kids have their books closed initially, and I would use the watch features. And let's say that there was 5 steps to the watch feature that was there. I might unveil steps 1, 3, and 5, and then have the students discuss and write on maybe a scrap piece of paper or on like a whiteboard that's at their table how they would get to step 2 and how they would get to step 4, so that they're more involved in the learning process, and so that those examples actually become teachable moments for you. Because I agree, if they're looking in the book and they see them all step by step right there, it may not mean as much as if they actually get to work with the discussion of those examples. So thanks for that feedback.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And those are all the questions we have, Shelly.
Okay, well, great. So let's just conclude real quickly with a quick summary. Rigorous learning is relevant to the real world. It definitely involves uncertainty, and it requires students to make judgments. Glencoe Math incorporates rigor with units that are built around the Common Core for focus, depth, and coherence. It has units that are appropriately challenging students with inquiry labs that encourage students to construct their own meanings. There's ongoing focus on the mathematical practices, the problem solving, and the higher order thinking. And the expectation is that all students develop their thinking skills through analysis and reflection, regardless of their level. So just remember to stop and ask yourself how you can increase your students' engagement with rigorous activities. I thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with me, and I hope you have a great evening. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and your participation.
That's really helpful. I'm glad we had some techniques that people were able to share with the whole group. As you exit this webinar, just a reminder, you'll have an opportunity to participate in a survey about the webinar. You can also give us more information about various topics you'd like us to present on in the future. We appreciate any feedback you can give us, and we'll be sure to send you an email with a link to the recorded webinar, which will also have a link to the sample, the page where you can sample the features if you don't already have this program. Yeah, and then also in the email there'll be an address you can send any additional questions to. So if there's something that comes to mind after this webinar, feel free to send those to us then. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.